things that I learned, or maybe I've known but were just brought to the frontal lobe of my brain through reading in Readicide. So some of the new learnings, I guess, or in some of these are things I do want to apply, but I guess just really brought to my attention, and maybe things I hadn't thought about or really truly and deeply thought about before. But to start, on page 7, the quote here, it's quoted, "We are developing test takers at the expense of readers." And I think that is insanity. We truly are. We're taking away some of the most practical things in education just to teach to a test, and it just doesn't make any sense. Something that I learned from Kelly Gallagher was on page 22, a little bit before that too, but it kind of summarized the page paradox that he was talking about, and he had the charts and the graphs explaining some of those things. But all in all, it's, you know, we're trying to treat our struggling students with reading, and we do all these things that we think are working, and they're not. And it's really just eye-opening to me, because I have been, you know, taught so many ways of everything he's telling us not to do. And there's a part that comes a little bit later, but he talks about how he was reading a novel with the students, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's no worksheets, there's no sticky notes, there's none of this, none of that, and they actually, you know, gain more information and have better comprehension from that. So what we're doing, you know, with our struggling readers and all of these tactics and stuff, it's really not making things better. Another thing that was mentioned that I was really brought to light, something that I don't know if I consider new, but again, just brought to my knowledge. But when it said on page 34, it was, "We are cutting valuable curriculum to teach reading." And so many of our standardized tests are all about everything in our science classes, our social studies classes. And so it was just crazy to me, and it's just something to think about, and in conversations that I've never had before that I think really, you know, truly need to be had. And that kind of connects with something on page 38. And Kelly Gallagher says, "If we are serious about building strong readers, we need to be serious about building strong knowledge foundations in our students." So we need to stop cutting, you know, the content area that matters most. I remember when I was teaching 6th grade, we had to have an hour for math. We had to have an hour and a half for reading, and that's not including like the RTI chunks that we had during the day, as you know, before it's changed to MTSS, but that's what it was called at the time. And we also had an hour for band every day, and that ended up being a very kind of wonky time, what to do with students. It was, you know, you're trying to do small groups. For some it became a study hall, but you have some students gone for band, and then, you know, they kind of, at the half-hour mark, they were going to, or another group was going to band, and so forth. But because of all of that, we were losing our science and social studies time. And it came down to about 40 minutes a day, and that might be on a good day, of one or the other. I was not teaching science or social studies every day because we didn't have time, because we had to have more time for reading. And so I just think that it really nails, you know, he really nails that point home. Also, I talked a little bit about this in my connections post, but there is a part where, let's see, it's on page 41, something that I know reading is declining, but it talked about, or it was on page 42, but it talked about SSR, silent sustained reading, and how some people are like, oh, you know, kids really aren't reading, and but he actually brought it to light that, you know, we need to bring it back, and because of the three main things. He said, you know, free reading, relates to better comprehension. Students can build knowledge and background, and then it also helps students to develop leisure reading habits. So that is something new to me, because I've heard so many things against it, but I really love what he had to say about that, and it's just a valuable investment and worthy of time. And then connecting a little bit to what I just said, on page 74, he talks about the students within that study, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's no worksheets, there's no sticky notes, there's, we're missing all of these things, like this isn't good teaching and so forth. But it made me think about, there is, if you guys know Cult of Pedagogy, Jennifer Gonzalez is the author of that website, and she writes books, and she's a keynote speaker all over and so forth. But she wrote an article called Frickin' Packets, and it just talks about how worksheets do not teach students. And a lot of times teachers are thinking that they have to use all of this stuff because it's what their district provides for them. But we don't, and especially when it comes to reading, just be authentic, be real, and so forth. Another thing that I truly learned from Kelly in Readicide is the 50-50 approach. While there needs to be some guidance, like I loved his idea of how to have like academic versus recreational reading. And in his classroom, students should always have two books. One where the teacher is guiding it, and then the other for recreation. And I just think a lot of the information that he shares, helps bring things to light and get students back to reading. So those are some of the new things that I have acquired from Readicide.